All right, so nice to see everybody again here. So for my persuasive speech, I'm going to do the same topic that I did for my informative speech, which is Medicare-For-All. So to start off, what if I told you that basically Medicare-For-All, you could cover more people at a lower cost and have better healthcare outcomes than we currently do, and it's the same system that the vast majority of countries already use. And this is relevant because everyone is impacted by healthcare in some way, whether as a career or in their interactions with it just in their day-to-day life. So my position is that the United States federal government should provide or should join the vast majority of other industrialized countries in providing universal healthcare in the form of Medicare-For-All. There are many different options, but this is the one that we're going to talk about today. And then this here is, which might be difficult to see, is just an illustration of how complex the current system is. So the point of this, all you need to know is the arrows showing how complex our current healthcare system actually is. And then additionally here is spending, so which will also be difficult to see. But the top line here that is far outpacing all the others is the United States, showing that we spend more per capita on healthcare, or as a percentage of GDP than the vast majority of other countries. So similar to my informative speech, I have some minimal amount of credibility here in that I would like to work in healthcare as a profession, and I work with it day to day in my job. So what we're going to talk about today is what Medicare-For-All is, how you pay for it generally, how it works, a bit of a compare and contrast between what we currently do and what this system would propose, and then we'll close by discussing why I think it's the best option. So to start, Medicare-For-All is pretty controversial and complex, Medicare-For-All comes from a single payer type of system, which means that every person pays one entity. In this case would be the federal government, unlike currently where we pay different entities like the VA or private insurance are all paying for healthcare together. So what single payer means is that the current system, basically just think of paying as in who you pay, basically. So the next major characteristic is that, so we currently spend, like this graphic shows, quite a bit on healthcare. And Sally Pipes of Forbes, who is a respected healthcare journalist, noted that the Bernie Sanders bill would cost about $1.4 billion per year, or per year about $32 billion over 10 years. And to pay for this, the Sanders plan would increase income taxes and a few other tax changes to make the tax code a little more progressive to raise that money to pay for it. The consumer is offset, as in there wouldn't be any co-pays, premiums, or deductibles, most likely. So the cost ends up being either basically the same or slightly less for the consumer. So the question would be, how does this change impact people just generally, like how it would impact their interactions with the system? Basically, the change would be pretty minimal, because, for instance, for employee or for healthcare providers, they would become under some under some types of this plan, they would become government employees, as they are in the healthcare system in the UK, for example. So there are some significant changes that would potentially occur. So now that there's some brief knowledge about what it is, just generally, we're going to examine the key differences between the current system and the one I'm proposing here. So the best way to understand this is to compare the policies from what is currently in place to what we have. So first, as I mentioned, Medicare-For-All is based off a single payer system, like we talked about, and healthcare is actually 1/5 of the United States economy. So this is a big deal. It would reshape a large portion of the economy. And as I briefly mentioned before, the U.S. Healthcare system is very complex. And Alicia, Adamzek, I believe is how you say her name, from Money.com, who is also a pretty respected healthcare journalist, has said that Medicare-For-All in this format would transition all these different types of insurers into one single system. And then Andrew Hackworth, who is also a respected healthcare researcher, has shown that Americans spend roughly 4 times as much on billing and insurance-related activities compared to countries like Canada or the UK, who have healthcare or a type of system like we're talking about here. So that's just one illustration of the differences between the two systems. Another would be the current system unfairly ties, in my opinion, healthcare insurance to your employer. So currently, the vast majority of Americans, around 180 million, get their healthcare through their employer. This would change that. Medicare-For-All would largely do away with that structure entirely. And evidence has shown that millions of people each year make employment decisions based on their, if they were to leave that job, they would be leaving that healthcare also, which kind of unfairly ties people to their job, even if they don't like it. Another important difference from this, from the status quo, and this would be what benefits are covered. So here we have what the Affordable Care Act did to basically list 10 essential benefits that all health plans had to cover. Yet there are still things that aren't covered by most plans. So dental care, for instance, and vision care are big types of care, you could say, that aren't covered by a lot of plans. So now that we've talked about the differences a little bit, we're going to talk about why I think it's the best option. So I believe it's the best option going forward because evidence has shown that health outcomes, total spending, and price for the consumer is actually better under a Medicare-For-All type system. So compared to our current system, the average individual would be healthier with this system because the 20 million people in this country who don't currently have health insurance would have health insurance. Those people would be healthier, and every time, so going on from that, Margot Sanger-Katz from the New York Times, who is one of the most respected healthcare journalists in the country, has reported that overall spending in the industry would be lower in the long run from the status quo compared to in a Medicare-For-All type system. Furthermore, Medicare-For-All would put the United States in line with the rest of the world, essentially, the rest of the advanced, industrialized first world countries, you could say. The notion that Medicare-For-All is a radical idea, I believe, is relatively nonsensical since it's so mainstream and widespread in the rest of the world. And again, this is going to be hard to see, but this graph is showing that support for single-payer healthcare overall has increased significantly in the past couple decades. Medicare-For-All is pretty controversial, as we've said and talked about a little bit, and I believe certain political moves by what would be the Democratic Party could make it more palatable, for instance. So, unfortunately, because of the current partisan atmosphere that we're in, the only way for a system like this to pass would probably be a democratically controlled House of Representatives, Senate, and probably the presidency. So just in conclusion to review, so the main points here were what Medicare-For-All is, a little bit how to pay for it, the differences between the systems, and then why I believe it's the best. And so just to restate my initial thoughts, I believe Medicare-For-All, the United States government should fund Medicare-For-All or a system like it to join the rest of the advanced industrialized world in guaranteeing health care to all people. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.